Hey BC, this is Luke with Hot Wax and Cool Vinyl. Welcome back. This is part 7 of my top 100 albums, numbers 30 through 21. This block of 10 records, I did take a little bit of some liberty. There are 3 records in this block of 10 that don't have any particular significance, either memory or emotion. They're simply too good to omit, so I had to include them. I just felt bad not. However, let's start with number 30. Number 30 is The Who's Kids All Right. Compilation album based on the movie of the same name. The album came out in 1979. I turned 16 in December of 78. So I just turned 16 when this album came out. And by the time I was 16, I had really started to listen exclusively to rock. Bands such as Supertramp and Styx and the rock bands of that day. The Who and other bands that are classic rock now were bands that were still lions of the period, but really didn't, when you start, I didn't start exploring their catalogs until after I got into the rock genre. And once I got into the rock genre and started exploring their catalogs, naturally I became a fan of all their stuff. This was the first album that I bought from The Who. And it allowed me to go from The Who to Led Zeppelin, and from Led Zeppelin to Pink Floyd, or from Pink Floyd to Led Zeppelin, etc., etc. I don't know if that makes any sense. The Who, I got to The Who by way of Supertramp and Styx, and then I started listening to the more, what is now commonly referred to as classic rock, and I got into all those bands. So this album basically was the entry point to all the lions of the late 60s, early 70s as far as rock is concerned. From The Doors to Led Zeppelin to Pink Floyd, etc. Number 29 is the first of the 3 albums that I discussed. The Sex Pistols, Nevermind the Bollocks. Certainly not musically not a wonderful album. It's not a very complicated album, not complicated music by any stretch of the imagination. Very strong lyrically, very politically charged lyrically. Sex Pistols were basically the first punk band. All the other punk and hardcore bands that came afterwards started, germinated from the Pistols. If you're my age or about my age, you remember that when the Pistols came out, it scared the living hell out of all our parents, because our parents had no idea what to make of this. This was like really just insane music for them. You had these guys, just dressed, horribly, and they're screeching and they're yelling and they're reciting anarchistic tones, and my God, they didn't know what to do. They really did think that this was the end of the world at the time, musically speaking. So, up next at number 28, Hotel California by the Eagles. It would warrant being on anybody's top 100 just because it's such one of those albums that is just, it's just a must-have in any collection, I would think. But for me at number 28, because there was a gentleman who I had become very, very good friends with about 7 years ago. unfortunately he passed away, but he was an elder in his church, and he owned an antique store, and he loved records. So he and I would have these long theological conversations and other odds and ends, but more importantly, we would discuss music. And it got one day to Hotel California. I don't know how it got on the subject, but I was absolutely shocked to hear that he really believed that Anton LaVey was on this record. Now, there may be one of two of you out there who have no idea what I'm talking about. So if you are, Anton LaVey is the father of the Satanic Church, and for the longest time, it was believed that Anton LaVey was actually on the Hotel California album. I don't know if you can see it in the photo, but if you look closely right here, Senator, there's a figure standing over there. Originally, it was believed to be Satan. And when that one was quickly debunked, the conspiracy crowd quickly decided that it was going to be Anton LaVey, the father of the Satanic Church. It's not. Sorry, guys, it's not. But Gary and I would have these amazingly long conversations, and I would Google it for him and say, look, here's nothing. I mean, he had, at that point, it was, that's who that is, it's on there. And as warm a memory as that is, because I really truly enjoyed this man's company and the conversations we had, I just, I can't get past it. I put on Hotel California, and it evokes a lot of memories for a lot of different things, but that's one of them, and that's one of the stronger ones. Next up, at number 27, another of my prerogative albums, David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust. I just couldn't not put it in this list. I'm sorry, it's just too great a record to omit. Even if I don't have any personal, memory or attachment to it, it's just such a brilliant piece of work that I would really feel bad if I had omitted it. Up next, we are at number 26. Van Halen's debut record. So Van Halen's debut record is one of those gateway records for me. Very much like Supertramp and Grand Illusion were gateway records from the pop music to rock music. The rock music to hard rock gateway records for me, the predominant one actually, was Van Halen and their debut album. Another one was Foghat Live. But this album and the power and the drive behind the music on this album was definitely one of those gateway records that I went from listening to just regular, I guess it was in a period of about a year. I went from pop to rock, and from rock to rock and hard rock. And then right after that, from hard rock, heavy metal, right into punk rock. But the gateway for me was Van Halen's debut album. That was one of the records that actually got me interested in hard rock. Recognized that I like hard rock and exploring it further and going on. So that would be what number were we? That was 26. Number 25. Alice Cooper's Greatest Hits. Now I don't have all of Alice Cooper's albums. I have, I guess, maybe 8 or 9 of the catalog. I grabbed this one. It's just, you know, I would have grabbed you $1 Billion Babies, but the song that actually is the one that draws the emotion out is School's Out. Originally released in 1972. I can't tell you that I heard it in 72 or even would have recognized what it was back then. I can tell you I heard it 2 years later in 74 or 75. Maybe the summer of 75, 6th grade for me. Had a real tough year at school that year. My family moved around a lot and didn't really have a whole lot of friends. And you know, I was always the new kid in each class, so naturally, you know, I got picked on each time I got to a new school. And I think that year I went to 2 new schools within the school year. So, you know, for whatever reason, I heard School's Out, and it just, you know, stuck with me. And that year when finally summer came around and I was able to get, you know, out of school and just enjoy summer, it was just, you know, and coincidentally, I guess I heard that song that year. I guess it's maybe the first time I really remember hearing it. Or maybe it was just that traumatic year for me, I don't really know. But Alice Cooper, School's Out, great record. And just a fun fact, before Alice Cooper assumed the name and went solo, the band's name was Alice Cooper, not the lead singers. The whole band, it was called Alice Cooper. That is number 25. At number 24, the third in my 3 prerogative albums, the Beatles' White Album. I know a lot of Beatles fans aren't enamored with this album. I happen to be enamored with the album. I think it's just a great record. I think it's a great album. I like all the songs on it. And I love the simplicity of the album. I always have. From the low-numbered to high-numbered, all of them. I believe I've got 5 copies of this record. This one is the white Capitol reissue, like mid-70s Capitol reissue on white vinyl. I believe I had this, no, I know I had this when I was in high school, because I remember bragging to my friends that I had the red, blue, and the white album on the red, blue, and white colored vinyl. So that one, you know, like I said, for me, the Beatles' White Album is one of my favorite Beatles albums. As much for the simplicity of the actual look, as for the music that it holds within. So number 24 is the White Album. Number 23 is the first of the ska records, and that's the Specials. This came out in 1980, and I actually remember seeing it when it first came out, and not really buying it because I hadn't heard anything on it. It didn't get a lot of airplay locally, and there were just so many new wave bands coming out, it seemed, every 15 minutes. And I didn't realize that these guys were a ska band. I just thought they were just another new wave band. So I passed on it, and I was in Europe in the summer of '80 when I first heard my first ska record. The first ska record I believe I heard was Bad Manners, Lorraine. Anyway, I came back home, and I wound up grabbing the Specials album and listening to it once, not really liking it, to be honest with you. I just kind of like meh, and I threw it and put it in the corner. And it's here because of that memory of listening to it and going, I don't like this. Not very, put it away. Lo and behold, it was 2 years later. Put it on again. listening. I was at a club and I heard some the Specials played, and I thought, I got this album at home. I have that record. Why don't I play it? And because whatever they were playing, whatever song they were playing at the time, I really dug. I know I'm kind of like going around in circles. Let me summarize, because I was babbling. In a club, I hear a song off the Specials album that I thought I didn't like, and I really dug the song. I went home and gave the album another listen, and lo and behold, it almost immediately became one of my favorite records in my constant play rotation. And put on my cassette deck and throw on so we listen to it in the car. So the Specials is on there for that reason. And it comes in at number 23. At number 22, this one is very near and dear to me. And unless you are from the east end unless you're from Long Island, and I think, Gino, you might be the only one who actually remembers this. WBAB is one of our radio stations out here, and they always have been a rock radio station. And they always put out what they call homegrown albums, where they facilitated local Long Island bands. And they would make these compilation albums from local Long Island bands, and they would give them away and basically sell them in all our local record stores. So Homegrown 84 comes out, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's the last of the Homegrown albums that came out. This is the next generation. And it's on here because that summer, 1984, I was had just become friends with, not even dating, the woman who is now my wife. We had just gotten to know each other, and we had started hanging out, and in so doing that summer, we got to be really friends with a couple of the bands that are on this album. And we would go see them, and we'd hang out, and they would, after their gigs, we'd all hang out together, and we'd have a couple of drinks, or we'd go to one of the local diners and have some breakfast. But this record always reminds me of that summer, and that summer is the summer that I met and fell in love with the woman who eventually became my wife of 28 years and the mother of our children, and the woman who, to this day, I find the most beautiful woman in the entire world. So that's why this record comes in at number 22. I could have probably been really cheesy and put it in like the number 1 slot, but she knows me well enough where she would have looked right. She would have seen right through it. So this comes in at number 22. At number 21, Queen's The Game. While not their best record, behind Radio Gaga, which I think is a dreadful song, this is probably the most disco-y album they have. Although Dragon Attack and Crazy Little Thing Called Love are really, really cool. But it comes in at number 21 because this album came out in the spring, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, of 1980. In 1980, I was a junior in high school, and this album comes out, and Crazy Little Thing Called Love and The Game, Play the Game, are like number 1 on the charts. And Another One Bites the Dust is like, I think it was like number 1 for I don't know, had to be like 5 or 6 weeks in a row on the charts. But the album comes out in the spring, and Queen starts touring for this album. And in September of 1980, which would have been the first month of my senior year of high school, they do 3 gigs at the Garden. So my first Queen concert that I'd ever seen was at the Garden as a senior in high school in September. And if anybody has ever seen Queen, you know what a show they put on. This was an amazing show. They rocked it to the max. It was just, Freddie was really at his peak and his prime. They were just such a huge band. They could have sold out Wembley Stadium. They were just that amazing and that popular. And that concert to this day stands out as one of the very best concerts I've ever seen. The showmanship and just the production that Queen did with that concert was amazing. So that record has to come in at number 21. Although it's not one of the better Queen albums, I recognize that. For me it is, because it led me to desperately search that ticket out, and a group of us went from my high school, like 15 of us all went to see the show. It was just ridiculous. So that's it. That's part 7. That brings the conclusion to part 7. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, please leave me a comment. Let me know what you think of the records. If any of these records bring back a memory for you, that's even better. I'd love to hear that. Up until then, it's a great Sunday afternoon. It's finally sunny and a little warm, so cheers, and hopefully the summer is going to be here shortly. Cheers all. Speak to you soon.